My name is Langi Latu, and I'm the Project Manager for Two Life Youth Mentoring Services. The acronym is Tyms. My role is I look after all the programs, mainly in schools, and coordinate different categories. We have 2 sports programs, 3 cultural programs, 1 leadership program, and 1 high school program. Across board, it's probably, I don't know, maybe 9-10 schools. General views for digital discipline, if we're looking at youth and then parents, I feel like youth grows so much more faster. Not just youth, but even like kids. Like we've got little babies and children like on iPads and stuff, and people have apps and things like that. So I feel like there is a definite gap between how fast our young people are using and making the most of social media versus my parents' age group or my grandparents. So with that, I feel like our younger generation has a lot more just kind of cloud, like a lot more things hovering over them. There's a lot more things to either worry about, a lot more things to celebrate. You celebrate like the likes or a lot of the artificial stuff, but you also have a lot of that cloud, which our older generation aren't really dealing with that much. My parents aren't stressing over likes. So my thoughts around the digital discipline program. Personally, I'm actually really grateful that we found it, because I think when you're in the mentoring space, and part of my role is to keep plugging in workshops or guest speakers for programs for schools and secondary students, it is so hard to find someone who comes in and talks about social media addiction, or who comes in and talks about how are we keeping ourselves safe online. It's not really something that we're seeing in schools that much. So before I even found digital discipline, like probably a year ago, we were Googling online, like what are the workshops that we can get to come into some of our programs. So we'd been looking for a while, but when we found Tony, I even let him know, like, it's so hard to find this type of workshop. And you would think that being in this day and age at schools, the amount of distractions that it has to school, that it's something that would already be kind of thought of or included as part of the curriculum. The digital discipline workshops that I was a part of, the first one that we actually went to, I was in the audience. So it wasn't for a session that we had booked. I was in the audience, and we were at a youth PD, and every single person who spoke before Tony, it was just your normal presentations. And then when Tony came up, everyone was like laughing. And I think just the way that he did the program delivery, but also the content was relatable. That's pretty much why we got his contact details and wanted to pull him into schools. But the content itself, and I think I kind of touched on it before, is that because we don't have an allocated time or spot to sit down and reflect on social media and digital safety, it really grabs attention because it's relevant. Like, it's one of those things that teachers say, oh, let's sit down and talk about dating culture over maths. Like, it's one of those things that everyone would turn off and want to listen to because it's relevant. We really enjoyed them, and I think the kids needed to see it coming from an educator kind of perspective. It's one thing to kind of just talk about it with your friends, but to have Tony up there with his PowerPoint and saying, look, this is what I'm doing, I'm accountable as a parent, this is how much time I'm spending on my phone, and I know it's an issue. I feel like that really hit home for a lot of the kids. There were times that he was like, put up your hand if this picture reflects your home, and all the kids put up their hand like, yes, that's my mom or that's my dad, they're all doing this. And I think when you're kind of in the room, it's a bit sad to see, because you're like, oh yeah, I do that too. So the workshops are a really nice reminder of, let's sit down and like reflect on how much we really allocate to our social media platforms. The digital discipline themes that I thought really impacted our students when we were at the secondary schools was, there was one point where Tony got the kids to do an activity where you stand up and sit down, and they got to reflect on some questions like, stand up if you think that you know people on social media who don't align with who they are on in person versus who they are in real life. And a lot of the students kind of stood up. We also did some parts about stand up if you feel like you have like a positive influence with social media, and just seeing how many people stood up versus how many people kind of sit down. When you see that number versus how many kids actually have social media, it's kind of a bit of a question mark, because if only half the class is standing up when they feel like they have positive interactions with social media, it can kind of, maybe that's more discussions that we need to have around how they can be safe. In saying that, I think that 100% I would recommend schools to have digital discipline in them, because obviously we know social media is great, but definitely there are some areas of kind of question marks where kids are feeling like social media is bringing me down, or social media as an antisocial student, it means that I barely get to talk to anyone because everyone's always on their phones at lunch. So it's kind of like with digital discipline, it's identifying the need that we really can see in the schools, and then it's prompting to schools that this needs to be going further with. We need to be sitting down more times, more follow-up sessions, because it kind of just shows the outcomes that social media has, both positive and negative.